People come to the Appalachian Trail for many reasons. Some walk it for exercise, measuring progress in miles in elevation. Some seek challenge, testing endurance against weather, terrain, and time. Others step onto the trail carrying something heavier, hoping that distance, silence, and motion will bring clarity, healing, or peace. For most, the trail does exactly what it promises. It guides them forward, one white blaze at a time, through forests that feel timeless and quiet places that ask nothing of them but to keep walking. But on this stretch of trail, that promise was broken. Welcome back to True Crime Maps. Here, we examine real cases shaped by geography, places where distance, terrain, and isolation quietly influenced what happened next. Tonight's story begins in a location that still exists and still remembers. This episode examines the murders of Robert Mountford Jr. and Laura Susan Susu Ramsay, both 27 years old, a 1981 double homicide in Virginia that exposed how quickly isolation can turn lethal. They set out on a fundraising thru-hike to support troubled youth back home in Maine, only to cross paths with a local recluse named Randall Lee Smith. This case isn't just about the horror of what happened. It's about the human lives cut short, the failures of justice that let a killer walk free, and the eerie echoes that resurfaced nearly 3 decades later. We'll map their journey, the crime scene along Dismal Creek, and the broader implications for hiker safety on America's most iconic trail. Before we trace the maps of their final days, let's remember Robert and Susu not as statistics in a true crime tale, but as vibrant, compassionate people whose lives were dedicated to helping others. Robert Tatton, Bob Mountford Jr., was born on February 4, 1954, in Millinocket, Maine, to Robert Mountford Sr. and Mildred Rideout. Bob grew up in a family steeped in social service. His mother operated a facility for children with developmental disabilities, inspiring his own career path. By his mid-20s, Bob had become a dedicated social worker and counselor at the Homestead Project in Ellsworth, Maine, a small nonprofit residential home for adolescents facing emotional challenges, learning disabilities, and behavioral issues. He was described as quiet yet profoundly committed, pouring his energy into helping kids navigate their troubles with patience and empathy. An avid outdoorsman, Bob found solace in nature, hiking, camping, and exploring Maine's wild landscapes. This passion led him to plan the Appalachian Trail hike with his colleague Susu, not just for the challenge, but to raise funds for the homestead's programs. Tragically, at age 27, his life was stolen on that very trail. Family members, including his father, spoke publicly about their enduring grief and outrage over the lenient justice that followed. Bob is remembered as a gentle helper of troubled youth, with his body cremated after the tragedy. Now, let's turn to Laura Susan Susu Ramsay, a name that evokes warmth and light even in the darkest retellings. Born on May 27, 1954, in Albion, Michigan, to parents Bud and Ginny Ramsay, Susu was the third of their children. Her early life was a whirlwind of moves, weeks after birth to Southern California, then by kindergarten to Northeastern Ohio, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and back to Ohio, settling in Aurora by summer 1965. These changes might have unsettled some, but Susu thrived as a natural athlete, excelling in competitive swimming at the YMCA and once outrunning all the boys in a 600-yard dash. She mastered water skiing, roller skating, and ice skating, turning every new place into an adventure. Music was her heartbeat. From school choruses to high school concerts, she sang captivatingly, taught herself guitar, and performed for family and friends. In drama club, she starred as Fammy Bryce in Funny Girl, belting "Don't Rain on My Parade" like Barbra Streisand. Elected homecoming queen for her generosity and popularity, Susu had a rebellious streak. As newspaper editor, she published controversial content, earning a 10-day suspension, backed by her parents as courageous. She loved pranks, like clown costumes to surprise her mom, baked Gila cookies as wrestling team mascot, and summers as camp counselor in Aurora. Graduating with honors, she attended Denison University, shining academically and in the Denison Singers, performing regionally and soloing. Post-grad, she mentored at Interlochen Academy, then earned a master's in art therapy from Norwich University in Vermont. By the early 1980s, she was an instructor and counselor at the homestead, using painting, sculpting, woodworking, and pottery to help teens express emotions. As an adult, Susu was an accomplished potter and amateur photographer, deeply loving animals, especially golden retrievers. In 1977, she drove solo from Ohio to Yellowstone, braving a blizzard and elk stampede near Jackson Hole. Embodying peace and love, she was open-hearted, uninterested in materialism, a free spirit forming no romantic ties until her final months. Friends called her a ray of sunshine, hilarious and endlessly giving. In spring 1981, she joined Bob on the trail to fundraise, her life ending tragically on May 19, 1981. She is memorialized at Sims Family Cemetery in Agre, Michigan, with an epitaph celebrating her as an excellent musician, thespian, athlete, comedian, student, and loving family member who died helping others. What bound Bob and Susu? Their shared passion at the Homestead Project, founded around in the early 1970s in Ellsworth Falls, Maine. It started as a community effort for at-risk and homeless teens, with Bob's family ties deep, his mother involved in management, focusing on emotionally disturbed youth. Over time, it evolved into Kids Peace's Graham Lake campus, a 44-bed therapeutic residential program on 12 acres by Graham Lake, still serving youth with autism, behavioral issues, and developmental needs today. Their hike was a charitable extension of this work, mapping not just miles, but hope for the kids they served. In spring 1981, Bob and Susu embarked on their through hike from Georgia northward, fundraising along the way. By May, they'd reached Giles County, Virginia, a remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail near Parisburg, where the path winds through dense forests, over ridges, and along creeks. On May 19th, they arrived at the Wapiti Shelter, a simple log lean-to along Dismal Creek, about 3 miles east of the Giles-Bland County line in Jefferson National Forest. It's a spot that looks idyllic on maps, surrounded by tall pines, with the creek babbling nearby. That evening, they encountered Randall Lee Smith, a 27-year-old unemployed local from Parisburg, born June 29, 1953, known as Lying Randall for his tall tales and reclusive ways. He lived with his mother near the trail, often wandering it alone, and befriended the pair, sharing a meal, perhaps fish or trail rations, lowering their guards in the spirit of trail camaraderie. As night fell, Bob and Susu retired to their sleeping bags. Smith left, but returned under cover of darkness. Armed with a .22 caliber pistol, a knife, a long spiked nail from the shelter, and a piece of angle iron like a fireplace poker, he attacked without mercy. Bob was shot 3 times in the head while still in his sleeping bag, quick, cold, execution style. Susu, hearing the shots, fled into the woods, but Smith chased her down, bludgeoning her with the iron, then stabbing her over a dozen times with the knife and nail, inflicting horrific wounds to her torso and head. He dragged their bodies into shallow graves nearby, covering them with leaves and brush, as if trying to erase them. The motive remains unclear, perhaps sexual intent towards Susu, though decomposition hid evidence, or fear Bob would retaliate. Imagine the terror, gunfire echoing off ridges, desperate chase through dark underbrush, screams vanishing into wilderness. This was the first double homicide on the Appalachian Trail, sending shockwaves nationwide, closing sections, and fueling fears of a predator in America's backyard. When Bob and Susu failed to check in, families reported them missing by late May. Search parties scored the area, Giles County Sheriff's Office, Virginia State Police, and the FBI. At the Wapiti Shelter, they found a large blood puddle on the floorboards. Expanding into the woods, they uncovered Susu's body first, partially buried under leaves, her wounds gruesome. Bob's was found the next day near a tree stump. As investigators worked to reconstruct Bob and Susu's final movements, attention began to center on Smith. Witnesses placed him with the couple shortly before their deaths, contradicting his later attempts to distance himself from them. When authorities searched Smith's home, they discovered blood-stained clothing that further deepened suspicion. Additional evidence emerged from the crime scene itself. A bloody fingerprint, recovered from a paperback book at the scene, matched Smith's prints already on file. In what appeared to be an effort to divert attention from himself, Smith staged his own disappearance, abandoning his truck and leaving behind a rambling note referencing the hikers while claiming he would be far away. Instead of creating confusion, the act tightened the case against him. A nationwide warrant was issued for his arrest on June 11, 1981. Tracked to a campsite in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Randall Lee Smith was arrested on June 22 after investigators tricked him into signing a document confirming his identity. He was extradited to Virginia and charged with 2 counts of murder. Although the case against him included the witness testimony, the blood-stained clothing, and the bloody fingerprint, prosecutors faced the limitations of 1981 forensic science. DNA testing did not yet exist, and blood evidence could establish only type consistency, not definitive identification. Much of the case remains circumstantial, and the state risked the uncertainty of a jury trial. On March 23, 1982, Smith pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder in a negotiated plea agreement, avoiding the possibility of a harsher sentence. He received 2 15-year sentences to run concurrently. In practical terms, that meant 15 years. He was released on mandatory parole in 1996 despite public protest. Here's where disgust sets in, serving just 7.5 years per life taken, equating Bob and Susu's vibrant existences to a slap on the wrist. Families fumed, the hiking community demanded reform. But in May 2008, less than 2 miles from the 1981 site along Dismal Creek, Smith struck again. Befriending fisherman Scott Johnston, 38, and Sean Farmer, 33, at a campsite, he shared dinner, then without warning shot them with a .22 short pistol, Farmer in the head and chest, Johnston in the neck and back. Both survived. Farmer played dead. Johnston escaped despite wounds. Smith fled in Johnston's truck, crashed it, and was arrested. A cache near the site revealed knives, Wicca drawings, and pagan symbols, hinting at occult obsessions, adding eerie mystery. Charged with attempted murder, Smith died in jail on May 10, 2008, from crash injuries, ruled accidental, robbing victims of a trial. How could this happen? A system releasing a double murderer back to his hunting grounds, allowing terror again. The murders of Bob Mountford and Susu Ramsay marked one of the earliest and most shocking acts of violence associated with the Appalachian Trail. While homicides along the trail remain rare compared to the millions who hike it safely, this case changed how many viewed wilderness isolation. Robert Mountford Jr. was the quiet anchor for so many troubled souls. In the vastness of Maine's woods and Virginia's trails, his path was one of quiet service, cut short by senseless evil. His family's enduring fight for justice stands as a testament to the love that outlives loss, and he rests in the peace he so freely gave to others. Laura, Susan, Susu Ramsay was a ray of sunshine, whose life was a melody of joy and giving. From Ohio stages to Maine's art rooms, she touched hearts everywhere. The trail that should have been her triumph became her end, but her spirit, adventurous, loving, unbreakable, lives on in every note sung and every laugh shared. She died helping others, and in that act of selflessness, she continues to inspire. Thanks for joining this deep dive on True Crime Maps. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Remember, maps tell stories, but people live them. Stay safe on the trails.